In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found No Proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 358. This week on the show, Andrew Scoville, the director of Theater of the Mind, which opens next week in Denver under the auspices of the Denver Center for the Performing Arts Off-Center program, is here to talk about the show. And our Venice Immersive coverage continues with Céline Tricart, creator of the VR experience Fight Back, which explores the issue of gender-based violence and gives participants a taste of the self-defense techniques they can use to, well, fight back. Plus, an update on the Denver Immersive Gathering during the show wrap-up. Got some fun news there. All this brought to you by our Patreon backers at patreon.com/noproscenium. Our latest backers are Lynn Gaza and an anonymous backer. Our goals are 3 new backers each week, so if someone can join today, that'd be great. This spooky season, in order to get us ready for 2023, if you can, hit up patreon.com/noproscenium, or if you're already a backer or can't commit financially, help spread the word about our work, whether it's the review rundown or this podcast or any of the stuff we make. Spreading on social media really helps. We need your help one way or another to keep doing what we do, and we're so thankful for those who do help, like our sustaining backers, Ari Hurston, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Genties, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Alani Hanson, Mark Baltazar, Sydney Guillory, and Jan Budman. Thank you all for keeping us going. And with that, we're going to get into this week's interviews. Well, this is one we've been looking forward to for a while. Andrew Scoville, who is the director of Theater of the Mind, which is opening up at the Denver Center for the Performing Arts. Okay, not physically, technically, but as part of the Denver Center for the Performing Arts Off-Center program. This is the show that is co-created by David Byrne, yes, that David Byrne, and Mala Gonkar. There was like a version of the show that existed before, but this is all new, but born from the same seed, which is something I wasn't going to say right now, but then I did because the caffeine's working. Andrew, hello.
Hello, Noah. How are you?
Oh, just living the note-free life. Andrew, you'll notice that I did not try to describe the show because I think I still don't know entirely what the show is. So tell us, what are people allowed to know before going in about Theater of the Mind?
Yeah, well, I think like a lot of work of this kind, part of the allure and intrigue is the mystery that we're able to create around it. So we've been working hard to let it be surprising for audiences when they come. But what I can tell you is that this is a multi-room experience that recreates conditions necessary for actual neurological and perceptual phenomena to occur. So the interactive and immersive aspects of the show will have audiences actually experiencing some of this phenomena firsthand for themselves, and it will be guided by an actor who's layering in narrative story elements to deepen and personalize some of the science along the way.
So a real-time exploration of scientific principles that work in the brain is kind of what I'm picking up on what you're laying down here. Yeah?
That's right. The experiments are intended to challenge our sense of self, our sense of identity by shaking up what we assume to be true through our perceptions.
Well, that sounds like my idea of a good time.
Which I said confidently, knowing fully the sort of ethereal nature of what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but And that's one of the interesting things about immersive work as a whole is just that it plays with perception, or when it's pretty successful, it often plays with perception, or like makes us question the angle with which we're coming at things. How did you wind up being on this iteration of the project? What's the origin story here? And I think this is something that's been in the works since pre-pandemic, like even this edition of it.
Absolutely. I've been involved in the project since about 2018, when I knew David from Here Lies Love. I was the associate director on that show, which happened at the Public Theatre and the National Theatre in London and Seattle Rep. And so I was working creatively with David on that show as Alex Timber's associate. And so we started our relationship there. And then between that project and this one, I spent a lot of time in pursuit of unconventional theatrical experiences that use science as a starting point or as a jumping off point. That's a passion of mine that I try to pursue whenever someone is asking me, but what is it that you want to be working on, or what is the kind of thing that really gets you going? And for me, it's about using science as source material and the stories that are embedded in there, and using that as a framework to try to understand the human experience is just the way that I feel really connected and plugged in. So in a way, this is like a huge confluence of so many of my interests. And I think some of the things that I had done along the way, it just made sense at the time when I met with David and Mala about the project, that I had experience doing these sort of larger scale immersive works, but also that I'm really in pursuit of science and understanding from that lens. So it felt like a real nice fit at just the right moment.
Do you feel like the immersive and experiential toolkit lets you dig into the scientific themes more than a traditional performance or proscenium type work does?
I think so. I think that what I love about that entry point is that it really leads with questions. I think that to me, the goal is always to bring science from a sort of answer-based, factual, cold, hard, and fast space into a more human, exploratory, emotional space. And I think that bringing it into storytelling in general is really exciting, though the actual things that we're doing in theater of the mind are ripe for this sort of immersive world, because they're fully participatory. It's something that you need to be in the right condition to experience. And so there's something really rewarding about leading an audience to experience something that it would be difficult to do on your own if you weren't guided in just the right way to get just the right effect.
Maybe dig into that a little bit there. I mean, what do you find yourself doing to prime people for effects? I mean, without giving away the special effects of it, but that entire approach, it's so. I mean, they're well. I don't want to overanalyze it because I could start riffing, but I'm curious with your own approach on that need to keep the audience's, the participants' perspective in mind, because you really are playing with them as kind of the canvas more so than the staging itself is.
Yeah, it's been really interesting directorially, because the actors need to balance so much when they're executing the show, and the success of the experiment is not only dictated by the clarity of the ask, what we're asking the audience to do at any given moment, but it's also with the connection that the actor is able to make with audience members throughout the experience, that I feel like that sort of openness that they approach each moment with, the audience approaches each moment with, that the actor's able to create in the space between themselves and the audience member, that openness and that intrigue and curiosity mixed with the very specific requirements of the experiment is actually what makes those moments shine. So it's, from an immersive toolbox, really pursuing that deep audience connection, that sort of authentic conversation between audience and actor. It fits really nicely into the toolbox. And the environment, what the science requires of the environment, the 360 nature of it, is also just fits very nicely into immersive work, because audiences at this point are expecting to walk into something that is all consuming and that covers every wall. So we're sort of able to tap into both of those tenets of this work, I think, in a really exciting way.
I'm going to chase both those lines in a second. I'm going to start with the connection. Is that something you find yourself casting for, or is that something that can be, those abilities developed in the actors through process?
I definitely was casting for it, for an ability to make a instant or nearly instant and meaningful connection with somebody. It was something I was looking for from jump, and that didn't always mean that the actor had the most amount of immersive work. We certainly have actors for whom this is their first immersive project, and so there's been a learning curve there. But everybody in the room is incredibly equipped to make those connections quickly. And so while we've been finessing that, I would say it's true that each actor brought that to the table from jump.
You've worked on some big IP immersive stuff and other large scale projects. I'm wondering if you're seeing, and when you mentioned the audience coming into the 360 environment and they're sort of expecting to kind of be surrounded by something, have you seen audiences get used to this form? I think there's a lot of folks, particularly outside of the two coastal wings, who sort of feel like, oh, immersive is so strange, and will people understand it, and can they do it? You've had a lot of people through your stuff now. Is that how you're finding audiences, or then he shrugs?
Yeah. I would say that I am finding that audiences definitely come, and correct me if I'm not picking up on the exact question.
No, I think I can already tell you are. So
I can tell that audiences come with a certain expectation around immersive work and what it is and what the game of it is. And there are expectations that there will be really lush environments, and there are expectations that there will be something to solve. We are, and in a way, theater of the mind as an immersive experience is needing to take a moment to onboard the audience in a way that is unique, I think, because this is not a choose your own adventure. This is not an open every drawer, open every door, and try to put the pieces together. This experience is actually most enjoyable when you follow the instructions as given, and when you allow yourself, you give over to the guide as a true guide, as someone who is there to help you access all of the neat stuff that we have to show you. And so it's been interesting to have people come in and really want to interact with a space in a way that they are pursuing the narrative, and we're actually very intentionally guiding the audience through the experiments and the narrative in a way that is, I think, is unique in a lot of this work. There is a clear order, and there are clear steps within each room that you go in that allow the experience to sing. So it's been interesting as we invite audience in, I can hear, when I'm waiting in the lobby to go in, I can hear them talk about what every single thing that the front of house staff says in terms of the onboarding speech that they give, really unpacking it and trying to find the mystery and the puzzle inside of it, when really the best way to the most robust theater of the mind experience is to give yourself over to the directions of the actor.
That moment when an immersive piece meets contact with the audience, it's like, no plan survives contact with the enemy. I can sense almost like a tension there, and that, you get this, like, I can imagine particularly like a big puzzling crowd coming in and being like, okay, well, like, okay, they just said this, but that must not be true. Let's try and reverse engineer it. How are you finding the way to settle everyone down and make sure it's not just like a bunch of rambunctious, junior high school kids in adult bodies running around and smashing through delicately constructed scientific experiments? Because I gotta admit, like, I have bad luck with science experiments, and makes me wonder, like, oh, would I just break everything?
No, you won't break everything. And
Okay.
we certainly will take all of the, we'll certainly take your rambunctious energy that is in pursuit of curiosity about the brain and about identity. We'll take all that. But there is, like anything approached scientifically, there are conditions that must be met in order for the stuff to work. And so it's really important that the actors feel empowered and feel comfortable leading the audience through all of this stuff. And so I think we opened up test audiences in this process way earlier than I'm used to doing. And I think for a second that was hard, because the actors were just getting acclimated to the thing. The incredibly robust and complex technology system around the project was just getting, to a state where we could run through the show. It essentially was not in any typical sense ready for it to be shared with an audience. However, all of the work that I just mentioned has to actually be worked out with the audience there. So there was really no other way to do it than to invite them before we were ready. And I think at this stage in the process, as we're looking towards our opening, we're grateful for that time. In the moment, it was certainly something that all of us were feeling, vulnerable by inviting them in before it's ready. And when you do that, when you have a test audience period, it's hard to feel like as soon as you get to previews, you're not like you should be ready to open. It's like, well, no, now we're in the preview phase, and we have to really defend all of our own creative processes within that, because it becomes difficult to not feel like you're all of a sudden elevating to like a finished state, to a state where there needs to be polished. But we had to take the road of inviting audience in really early in order for us to get there. So I'm grateful for it. I think, like, as much as a lot of this kind of immersive work benefits from bringing audience in super early, and it's not often that we have the luxury to do that, and certainly it's not often that I feel the kind of support that I felt from DCPA at that time of continuing to defend the process even as we opened it up. So that's been something that I've been super grateful for.
Do you feel like if given the opportunity to bring audience that early, you do it again? Or
Definitely, yes.
what keeps you working in this form? Is it just the opportunities are presenting themselves, or is there something that draws you to working in immersive? Because there's other avenues. You've worked on Broadway, you've done other types of projects. Is there something that keeps you coming back to this experiential form?
It feels very intrinsic to the mode of storytelling I've always been interested in. Even the stuff that I've done that, on at glance could appear to be more traditional. I've always been in pursuit of a unique relationship to the audience, and I think before all of this, before immersive work really exploded, I was still more attracted to a show where people are not seated, for example, or where they move from location to location. So I do feel like I'm always curious. And as someone that lives in New York City, I'm always looking around being like, oh man, there's so many opportunities here for work to sort of just like emerge, or to bring this work to places that aren't just in the theater, whether it's at museums or parks. And so I find that the accessibility of this style of work is something I'm really excited about. And some of the most exciting moments for me have been when I bring work that I feel like in a typical theater setup would be looked at a certain way or be evaluated in a certain way. When I bring that same kind of work somewhere like a park or a theater, there's a park or a museum or something. There's something about the delight in the audience, the unexpectedness of it all, that elevates the work to a different level. There's like an expectation, or maybe an openness against expectation in those kinds of environments, in that kind of relationship between the show and the audience, that I find to be really exciting, and I actually feel like is the place for to really make an impact on somebody, whether that's like looking at something a different way, or their imagination opening up into a new area of interest that they didn't have before, making connection with a group of people when they really needed to feel that. I just feel like being inside of it creates space for that in a way that more traditional work does not, in my opinion. So in a way, I guess I've always felt drawn to it, and I also feel like in this increasingly digital world where people can put on a headset and be anywhere, there's an element of connection to immersive work that you step inside of that I think is only going the need and the desire for it is only going to increase as things get sort of um, more readily available in a digital and way. That this sort of the experience being really actually happening around you with actual other people is only going to become more magical, in my opinion.
You've had the experience now of producing this work for the DCPA or under the DCPA. You've done work on some like the big activation-y stuff, like you did I think one of the money heists that happened for Netflix. How are you finding these arts institutions and these kind of big corporate entities viewing the immersive work? Are they more interested in it now than they were before? Did the pandemic was such a pause on so many things? I'm always trying to get a sense of how people are seeing the levels of institutional support for this, whether it's fleeting or something that feels like it's growing.
That's a good question, and I feel like within that question, the DCPA and specifically Off Center and Charlie Miller as the leader in that space is in a class of its own. Like I've never worked in an environment where the sort of the main tenets of this kind of work are really known and held and understood on both a deep business level and also at a creative level. And so architecting a process for this huge show in collaboration with the DCPA there was more understanding there that I was able to work with, which was incredible. And I think that speaks to the community that Off Center has built and their history of work and the scale of that work that they've done in the past. And it's really unbelievable to work with a group of artists who are both skilled at like putting up a huge main stage in a typical proscenium theater, and also are able to create and craft things that are expected to be viewed, within inches of the audience's eyes. So I've the interest and the support that I've experienced here in Denver is truly in a class of its own, and the willingness of the talent of the artists is it's really quite incredible. And I think I sort of feel like it's in its own class over here in my experience.
That's actually, while it's on one level like disappointing for like the rest of the country, it's also really good to hear that like there's this institution, there's this entity that is building to that standard, that is working that standard. Because I mean, I think we both know like it varies wildly across the country. Like you can get into conversations with people in the arts world or in the entertainment world who barely know that this stuff exists, and you get other people who've been, you know, giant fans for a long time. But the number of people who know how to execute well, we've loaded into school buses before. So and we'll load into school buses again until we can get a second school bus and more people. But yeah, I'm really glad that the show is coming around. I'm really interested in the fact that Denver. We just had Charlie on the show a couple of weeks ago, and that the DCPA is elevated off center to its own pillar is also a really exciting development, and maybe others will follow suit.
Yeah, I think it's to all of our benefit that that's happened over here, and I think hopefully the theater is rewarded in whatever metric is important to them in a way that validates this work and encourages others to take these kinds of risks in the future.
All right. Well, Andrew, I know you're in previews right now. You've got a bazillion things, I'm sure, to do other than yabber with me, but I'm so grateful you took some time to talk with us today about the show.
Thanks. No, I really appreciate it. This was a privilege for me. Thanks.
Céline Tricart is the acclaimed director of the VR experience The Key, which made its festival debut at Tribeca in 2019. This year, she's back with another VR piece, making its bow at the Venice Biennale's Venice Immersive program, which runs concurrently with the famed film festival. That work is Fight Back, an introduction to self-defense techniques as an answer to gender-based violence, which blends physicality, psychology, and history into a potent VR experience. Céline, thanks for being back with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's always good to get a chance to talk to you. So it's I'm happy about this. And one day we'll get to meet in person, I swear.
We're kind of past that notion of being in the same physical space as other humans, you know.
Oh, almost. But you're in Venice right now. How can you say that? You've been there. You've been there in the center of the entertainment world right now. So I took a crack at describing Fight Back, but how do you describe this latest piece of yours?
Yeah, no, I think you did a pretty good job at that. Fight Back VR is a 40-minute long experience that we have crafted for a specific audience, although it is open to anyone. The specific audience that we have in mind is women, but also teenagers and anybody who is in a certain position of vulnerability, because the piece is about physical empowerment. With that in mind, we have crafted that journey that has a metaphorical approach, very similar to my past work, The Key. And throughout the experience, you get to learn certain gesture and liberate sisters from your constellation, because in this metaphorical world, you play the role of a newborn star in a universe where stars are being captured by shadows who are feeding off their light. So you go on this journey to liberate your constellation from the shadows, and each of your sister will teach you a new skill as you liberate them. And of course, at the end, it is revealed that those gestures that you've been using throughout the experience are basic gesture of empowerment, self-defense, that you have developed some kind of muscle memory over the course of the experience, and you're encouraged to continue your training. And it is also revealed the true identity of your sisters, the star that you've liberated.
So the key, your last work was inspired by the experience of refugees. What was the spark for Fight Back?
The spike for Fight Back actually was when I went to Iraq in 2017 to make a 360-degree documentary about the Sun Ladies, which were Yazidi women who were captured by ISIS and sold as sex slave and liberated themselves or escaped and decided to join the Kurdistan army to fight back and liberate their sisters. So that documentary, The Sun Ladies, premiered at Sundance in 2018. But when I came back from Iraq in 17 from the front line, I was so moved and I was so impressed by the Sun Ladies, those Yazidi women. They literally changed my life. I can say that. And the one thing that I noticed in Iraq that was really strange is that I interviewed the Sun Ladies who were fighting on the front line and risking their life. And then I went to refugee camp and interviewed other Yazidi women. And I noticed a big difference between the two. I noticed that the Sun Ladies seem to be healing and recovering faster and better than from the trauma that they've survived versus the women in refugee camp. And I tried to understand why. And that's what started my research into physical empowerment, the act of fighting back, and that how it affects your mental health and how it affects the way you see your body and how you behave in the world. So that was actually a very long time ago. It took 5 years to bring that idea to life. But it was also a journey of me finding how to tell the story and in using which medium and which language.
When did you know you wanted to not just tell the story, but have those who are part of it go through some of the motions of the physical empowerment? When did that become a keystone for you?
That was pretty late in the process because originally Fight Back was supposed to be a documentary series in 360 degrees, that very similar to Sun Ladies, but in different countries, in different communities, showing different women at different age and fighting for different reasons as well. But we couldn't find financing for this series. Then it transformed into a feature film, non VR flatty, as we call them, documentary feature. Same here, we couldn't find financing for it. We're actually still trying. I still hope to bring that story to life through in a feature documentary. We actually went to Kenya and we shot a little teaser for the project. So hopefully one day, you know. But then about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, actually, I had that idea of transforming that story into a virtual reality, quote unquote, game. I called it at the time the Beat Saber of self-defense because I loved Beat Saber. I had so much fun in Beat Saber. I was like, this is building up, you know. First of all, I'm working out and it's improving my reflexes, etc. I was like, what if we can use VR to create muscle memory of actual gesture of self-defense and help people, just not by just inspiring them through watching stories of other women, but actually having them learn through the game those reflexes. And then the idea is to say, if you've played the game, uh, that's all it takes. That's all it takes to actually go and get properly trained. The game itself is not a training in self-defense. That's definitely not what we do. It's just a quick introduction and a very few basic gesture, and then hopefully people will continue to get interested in empowerment, self-defense, and get trained. I call it a game, but I'm trying not to because when I say Fight Back VR is a game, then it kind of like scare away non-gamers or people who are not experienced VR user. Well, really, the experience is designed specifically for those people, for the non-gamers, beginners in VR. But we use game mechanics, but we try not to have that idea that Fight Back is a game.
It's one of those things that's, I think, tricky for everyone making immersive experiences to sort of navigate, because the only words we have in sort of the global language for, oh, you're interacting with this computer thing, and it's you're not typing and you're not just clicking, you're doing something else. And the only term we ever use for that is like, oh, it's like a game, even though it's not, you're not really you're not playing it, this isn't trying to rack up a score or anything, but there is that embodiment, there is the physical interactivity. I'm really curious about the progression of the physicality, and just sort of, I'm wondering who you worked with, and what you drew on to select the move set that is in here. What's the origin, and what's the logic of going from sort of a kind of a taking space gesture through throwing punches by the end?
Sure. Yeah. So that was a very interesting moment in production. Actually, was specifically like choosing those gestures. So over the course of the production, we did very extensive research on self-defense and the gesture and how it works, and read a lot of scientific studies about it. We talked to a lot of experts. We have multiple PhD professors in expert in like gender studies and self-defense specifically, that we interviewed, and we assembled that like 70 plus pages document of research. um, Additionally, I'm a martial artist. I've been most of my life, but self-defense is not the same as martial arts. I want to make this very, very clear, because sometimes when we say self-defense, people imagine that we like do flying kicks to the head, and they're like, oh, I can't do that. There's no way somebody like me would be able to do that. So self-defense is open and available to anyone, whatever your age or your body shape or anything. So we had to also take that into consideration. I also became, earlier this year, I became a certified self-defense instructor. I got certified by an organization called ESD Global. And all of those research led us to pick those gestures that we have in the game, which the first one is kind of like stage one of self-defense, which is awareness and understanding your boundaries and your private space, your physical private space, and where those boundaries are, and how to have them be respected and communicated. And so the first gesture is linked to that notion of we deserve the right to, have our private space, physical space be respected by others. So that first gesture is kind of a training in that sense. The second gesture is a shield, so it's learn how to block an attack. A lot of people, and specifically women, would think that they cannot block or survive a punch, and in Fight Back VR, you get to block very efficiently, attacks from those shadows, and that really makes you feel it in your body, that you have that strength and you have that possibility and that skill in you. The third gesture that you learn is actually fighting back, as we call it, which is in the case of our experience is punching. as we're using hand tracking. So your hands are tracked in real time. You don't use controllers in the game. But VR headset at the moment do not track legs. So we were not able to do like knees, or kicks. So we focus on punching. So you learn how to find weak points and to launch attack to weak points. And finally, the last gesture we have in the game is what we call the power stance. It's actually a quite famous stance where you have your leg kind of spread apart and you raise your fist up in the air, like as you do like a big star, like a big X with your body, and you breathe very deeply, and that makes you like feel strong and powerful. And so that's the gesture that you use in the game to change scale, and you grow as you did that gesture. You're supposed to kind of like mentally grow, and in the VR we actually physically grow with that gesture. So those are kind of the gesture that we've picked with that trick, as I said earlier, of using hand tracking. So the experience is developed for Oculus slash Meta Quest 2. And Meta Quest 2 has hand tracking available and enabled. It is not very used at the moment in games and experience for a very good reason, that it's not really ready. It's still a little bit tricky, and it's still a little bit difficult to master. So we tried to find gesture that would work with hand tracking. It was a bit of a challenge. But the game, you can also be played with controllers. So sometimes if hand tracking doesn't work because the lighting is not good or for whatever reason, then you can always switch to controller and continue the experience.
Yeah, the hand tracking stuff is interesting because like when it works, it really works, and it feels seamless and magical. And this isn't just in your experience, but like across the board with how they've implemented it. But when it breaks, it just becomes, there's like an uncanny valley experience where you're just like, oh, but that worked a second ago. What's going on?
Yeah,
So
exactly. Well, that's also the reason why here in Venice, for example, we are with the participant when they do the experience. We're with them. We talk to them. We encourage them. We cheer them. It's a very important part of the experience to have an ally with you, cheering you on, and also giving little advice when hand tracking become a little bit wacky, But we found here in Venice that when you do that and you stay with the person, it becomes, even the bugs and the wackiness of hand tracking become fun, and it's actually, it's like it's like, yeah, whatever. And so very rarely we switch to controller. It might have happened maybe 5 or 6 times over the course of the last 10 days. But this is something that we will have to add to the experience before we release it, because the plan is to release it for free on the Oculus App Lab later this year. So we will add that dimension of cheering and having an ally with you, cheering you on and helping you out in the experience itself. So when people play at home alone, they will still have that.
I love that that's something you've discovered over the course of festival time. Adding a dimension.
Yeah, it's a giant playtest here.
Yeah.
It's a world premiere. So, and if you've been in VR, you know that there's so many bugs, and it's just terrifying to release a VR experience in a big festival, because you know that the first couple of days will be just horrible, and you're just gonna have to make new builds and fix bugs, and just so on our case we just improved the inboarding, and learn that staying with the person and cheering them and helping them was making a big difference. So yeah, that's our beautiful world premiere slash playtests here in Venice.
So the next thing I'm going to ask about it gets a little bit spoiler territory, but you did mention at the end you meet your sisters, you get to know who they were before they were stars. I guess I'm imagining some of these are figures, historical figures, or even contemporary figures that were part of that research you were doing for the feature length version of this story. Am I right in that? I guess I'm curious about the folks you've selected to sort of meet at the end, and I also wanted to note that it's just the really interesting thing mechanically there is, because you're using the hand tracking, this moment of encounter you get to have, it starts with you taking their hand, which is just such kind of profound in the digital sense, because you're not using a controller to just be able to like reach out and then make a connection with a figure. But yeah, I'm curious about how you selected these particular women.
Sure thing. Yeah, it's that's one of the magical moment with hand tracking is they reach out with their hand and you just get to touch their hand, and that's something that hand tracking is extremely powerful at. So yeah, so uh, well, over the course of our research for the feature documentary that we're still hoping to shoot one day, we have identified stories in numerous countries, so like 10-ish countries. It was important for us to be going to all continents and, be in like different cultures and different situation and contexts. We don't want people to think that, you know, women fighting back and getting together and fighting back is just for only specific cultures, specific countries, and specific issues. We want to like draw a broader view of the problem and its solution. And over the course of our research, we narrowed down to 4 countries and 4 stories, and one of them is in Kenya, and it's the karate grannies. The karate grannies are elderly women that live in the slum in Nairobi. So extreme poverty, very, very difficult life for those women. And what has been happening is they've been targeted by rapists, because there's that urban legend that if you rape an elderly woman, you won't get AIDS or something, because they're old. And so they've been banding together, getting together, and decided to learn karate. Uh, so imagine a group of 70, 80, sometimes 90 years old grandma in the slum getting together and learning karate. And since they've been doing so, the rate of rape has dropped considerably in their neighborhood. It's very efficient at deterring aggressors. So we went there in Kenya right before the pandemic with my producer, Mary Blondio, and we met with them. It was fun. We trained together. They actually kicked my butt. They're very strong. And we got to meet one of them. Her name is Florence. We had a very good connection with her. So when we were working on Fight Back VR, and we knew we wanted to reveal the true identity of the sisters of your constellation at the end of the experience, we knew that Florence was going to be one of them. But we also wanted to show, like I said, different culture, different continent, and also different moment in time, that there's been strong women fighting back and pursuing physical empowerment for centuries, and even more than centuries. So, for example, we have Angie Mui. Angie Mui lived in 16th century China, and she trained in martial arts, but she struggled with fighting against other men using men's martial arts. So she decided to go and create her own martial arts, and she did, and it's called Wing Chun, and it's actually a martial art that is thriving, and it's still being passed along today. There's millions of people learning Wing Chun still today. There is Telesilla of Argos. Telesilla of Argos was a poet in ancient Greece, and her city of Argos was attacked by the Spartans. We all know the Spartans and how fierce warrior they were. So the army of Argos was defeated by the Spartans, but Telesilla assembled all the women from the city. They went on the walls of the city and they defended Argos against the Spartans, which retreated. There is also Captain Lakshmi. She was a doctor in India. And when an India army was created for independence, to fight for independence of India, she joined the army and became a leader of an all-female unit. And after the war, after fighting for her country, she became a doctor again and continue to take care of the people who needed it. And finally, we have Edith Margaret Garud, who was born in Victorian England, and she was a suffragist, so fighting for the right to vote for women. And she also had a jiu-jitsu dojo. So imagine Victorian lady in England teaching jiu-jitsu. And so she actually trained a special unit of suffragists because suffragists were under a lot of attack from the police, violent attack. So she created kind of a bodyguard unit for the suffragists that she trained in jiu-jitsu, and they fought against the police.
Oh my goodness.
So those are the 5 incredible characters that you meet at the end of Fight Back. But I just want to say that the metaphor of stars in the sky and darkness and shadows is kind of that idea that just as there is billions of stars in the universe, but we can only see so many, and most of them are hidden in darkness. There are that much of incredible, strong women that have existed in history. We just pick 5, but there is thousands of them you don't see. And so through the course of the VR experience, you get to kind of shine a light, like literally, you shine a light on the story of those women. But there are many, many more of them.
Well, Céline, it's a really spectacular piece, and I'm glad to know it's going to be releasing wide in the App Lab later this year. I hope you're having a good time in Venice, guiding people through and enjoying the biennial. Anything else we should be keeping our eyes out for, either with regard to Fight Back or any of the other projects you might have in the irons in the fire?
Well, no, I just want to say again that we are going to make it available for free later this year. So keep an eye out. We have a website, fightbackvr.com, where you can put your email address and we'll keep you posted about when the game is released. And we are trying to assemble financing for Impact campaign, which is to bring Fightback VR to the communities that need it the most. For example, women shelters. So those are communities that don't have VR headset, probably don't even know, that experience exists and it's out there. So we want to try to bring it to the people who need it the most. So we are looking for any help and support that we can find. So you can always reach out if you want to help.
All right. And the link to Fight Back is going to be in the show notes. So I encourage everyone to click through and learn more. Céline, thank you for joining us from Venice, and looking forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much for having me.
Once again, I want to thank Andrew and Céline for being our guests on the show this week. Again, you can check out Theater of the Mind in Denver, and it's going to be running through December, if memory is serving me right now. More on that in a moment. And Venice Immersive is wrapping up this weekend. I've got a few builds that I need to go check out as well. And so we're going to have some more notes on the festival early next week. And as Céline noted, a Fight Back should be coming to the App Lab on Oculus. Oops, sorry, MetaQuest. I'm going to keep calling it Oculus, man. It's just going to happen until they change it back. So that should be coming hopefully maybe later this year. We'll see how that rolls out. Denver. A lot of you know the Denver Immersive Gathering is coming up November 4th, 5th, and 6th. This is a event put together by our friends at Immersive Denver, along with our help. We've helped program some of the work in it, including the talk that's going to happen on Friday with the folks behind Galactic Star Cruiser, Anne Morrow Johnson, Sarah Thatcher, and Michael Tara Garver, giving a never-before-seen talk about how all the immersive bits get put together to make Star Cruiser work. Also going to include a chance for everyone to run around Meow Wolf's Convergence Station. And that night, one of the things that's exciting, and is definitely exciting me, is we're planning a series of affinity dinners. So there's going to be small group chances for folks to get together on a topic with some of our special guests pre-programmed in there to help guide and keep the conversation flowing. This is a really different kind of intimate gathering of the community from anything we've done before. So not a big conference, but a chance for folks to check out work together. Of course, those who got VIP tickets all got tickets to Theater of the Mind. See, it all ties back in together. And I'm here to tell you that the VIP tickets are sold out. In fact, we've only got about 40% of the tickets at all left. So there's still tickets left. There's still a chance. A good number of you have a chance to get those tickets. And the standard tickets are really a great deal. But if you wanted to get Theater of the Mind tickets, you're actually still in luck, because we have a way for those who didn't get to be on VIP, and mind you, VIP means you also get a priority selection on everything else, including the affinity dinners and your festival selections. But if you didn't get that, then we have a way to buy into the Theater of the Mind pool through our setup. So you are not out of luck if you are looking to come to Denver. And given the lineup, given who's coming through, I get to see the folks who bought tickets. This is going to be a really fun gathering. There's folks coming in from all over the country. There's folks coming in from Canada. I'm really looking forward to seeing you all. I've been looking forward to seeing you all for a long time. As I am saying this, we've got 55 days till the event, plus about half a day, and actually 55 days, 15 hours, 12 minutes, and 29 seconds. As I say this, there's a countdown clock on the thing. Gotta get me one of those. And it's just gonna be a blast. So I say, look into it. If you haven't already. I'm looking up right now the standard tickets. They were $150 just a few weeks ago. The ticket did go up after Labor Day. It's now $200 for the standard pass. It does not come with fire trucks, which are going through. But there's so much stuff going on. It is definitely worth it. We're going to have some more fun announcements next week. There's something brewing in New York. Not a conference, but a real opportunity for folks to maybe catch a show they've been trying to catch. Is that enough of a hint? Anyway, we got something else coming up for you next week. The spooky season newsletter, that was originally planned to come out this week. I'm making the decision right now, committing to it right now. We're delaying that one by a week because I want to make sure that I've gotten enough material in there. Also, it was a short work week and it's been really hot, so my brain has not been working. But I will tell you, if you are here in the LA area, I want to give you 3 things to be on the lookout for right now. Item the first, I just caught this last night, it's not in LA, it's down in Anaheim, but Crossroads Escape Games, The Weeping Witch Room. This is a sequel to their seance experience from a few years ago, but now it is like a permanent room there. It takes the place of the psych ward game that they had. Just played it last night with a couple of friends. It is absolutely fantastic. We made it out of there with seconds to spare. There were only 3 of us, and it's kind of optimal for 6 or so. Crossroads always does an amazing job, but this they've topped themselves this time, and just an absolutely fantastic experience. Also, an experience where an actor appears in the room as the titular weeping witch. And it is creepy as all get out. Just a really, really fantastic, perfect spooky season event. Got some jump scares in there. It's a wee bit scary, but no contact. So like you're not going to be made to do anything that you don't want to do type thing. So there you go. Please do yourself a favor and check it out. It's literally opening today as I'm recording this. Another one to check out, our friends at Cricklewood Immersive. They are doing a show they call Boston Bar Bloodsuckers. I'm doing this from memory. Boston Bar Bloodsuckers. Go to a place where everyone knows your fangs. That would be a bar. In this case, it's in Burbank. It's happening at the Roguelike Tavern. This also just got announced this week. Kind of a murder mystery vampire sitcom that's going to be happening at the Roguelike a few times during spooky season. And then on the non-spooky season front, Corinne Wick's casting. We're going to have Corinne on the show next week. But casting, which we've had, which keep trying to program into our festival, and then our festival keeps on looking to happen. That show is now been announced. It's a pay what you can setup, so anywhere between $5 and $20. It's about a 20-minute and change show. It's going to be at Thymele Arts. Again, 4 dates coming up this month. So that's what's happening in LA. Next week for the full spooky season spectacular newsletter, and yeah. I hope you find a way to stay cool. I'm doing what I can without air conditioning. I don't. I need to do something about that. I think, at least for next year. Yeah, that's it for now. Let's do the credits. The associate producer of this podcast is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. And the podcast is, all the other work is me. I'm Noah Nelson. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.